may actually be that the pensioners are put out to pasture and there is no recovery for them anywhere. So a person could actually be out in retirement and they would not receive any pension for almost a year. Now, how do we know that? Well, there was a case not too long ago filed in 2009 in Pritchard, Alabama, which was a Chapter 9 filing. And the Chapter 9 filing, the judge that had to handle it was a federal judge because Chapter 9 falls under federal jurisdiction. And what the first thing that the judge did was to halt all pension payments to police and fire. And these people literally did not get paid for the next year or so. And there was no pension salvation for them. That case was eventually dismissed. But it wasn't dismissed on grounds that you might think. The reason that case, and that was, by the way, the only case in which a judge had actually taken steps to reconcile the pension problem. No Chapter 9 before that had ever dealt with the pension issues. Not Vallejo, California, not Bridgeport, not Orange County, none of them did. Pritchard was the first one. So the problem with this is, in Central Falls, there is almost no money in the police and fire pension trust fund, and there's no more money that's likely to come in. So the judge will likely terminate their pension payments immediately after they declare Chapter 9, in the same way that Judge Schulman did in the Pritchard case. Now, why is that a big deal to all of us? Well, nobody has ever taken a case to full fruition, and I don't know what could happen, and I'm not going to try and speculate or say that I know, but what will the headlines say in the Providence Journal if the police and fire, who are already retired, counting on pension checks, suddenly have their checks terminated? Does that mean that the General Assembly stands up and says, well, we'll cover those pension payments. Don't worry, police and fire, we will take care of it for you? I don't know if that's going to be the case, but I put that question to one of my local representatives and asked her straight out, what are you going to do with the police and fire pension in Central Falls? And she didn't know, and she said, we have actually talked about it. Now that issue for Central Falls is not so dramatic, but the question is how they handle Central Falls will likely be how they may have to handle other localities. We know of a lot of communities that are having problems just because of pension payments. So the reason that this is important, and I try and encourage people who hear me say, teachers and state employees have given their fair share. They've paid their dues. But at the same time, I'm saying, wait a minute, but you also have to be thinking around the corner that don't push everyone to the brink. Because in the end, you don't know if you're going to be downwind of some really bad news. So my point in going through all of this is that people have to be aware and have to realize why this issue is so important, even at the Central Falls level. Because we don't know eventually what the entire state or what other communities, and as most people know, Central Falls gets 100% of its school payments paid, 100% of the teacher pension payments are paid, and that was in the school funding formula. So how does that translate if Central Falls gets their police and fire bailed out by the General Assembly using general funds? What does that translate into for any other municipality that may be in a similar situation? We don't know. But I would watch very closely the situation in Central Falls and what the General Assembly, how they react to that after whatever federal judge looks at it and says, okay, tomorrow we have to terminate all pension payments. I don't know what the issue is, but I think it's going to be a very critical one for the state. Now, back to, are there any questions on that, by the way?
Gary?
Yes.
When they say that funds are unfunded, well, who didn't put in? You describe how these teachers and firemen made contributions, fine. Nobody took that money out. When a pension plan is unfunded, who didn't put in?
Okay. the pension system goes way back to the 1940s. Teacher pension plan, state pension, I mean, they're really old. But it wasn't until recently that we actually decided to sit down with a pencil and paper like the king should have when he was deciding to give the gift, to actually figure out what it was going to cost. So we did sort of a, we'll pay as we go kind of endeavor. And so the state actually never was making fair contributions. The state was just sitting back and saying, hey, look, it's great, we're getting all these teacher payments, and the stock market will go to the moon. And that's how they got away with it. If I could digress just for a second, because this is sort of an important point. In 1999, Governor Gray Davis signed into law a bill that would retroactively give all pensioners an extra bucket of money. Here's an added increase to your pensions, and we're going to do it in 19. So he signed that into law to even people who are out have retired. We're going to give you a bump up in your pension. Let me tell you what they based it on. They said that by 2009, remember this is 1999, by 2009, the stock market would be at 25,000. The Dow would be at 25,000. And they actually used that, and the CalPERS, the judging body who decided that, actually went out and wrote it all up in a business case analysis and said, look at this chart. The stock market's going to the moon. And by the year 2001-99, the Dow would be at 28 million, and they had some number. It was absurd. So over time, people who sit in governing positions say, well, the stock market will take care of it. So we don't have to make any contributions. Forget about getting an actuary in. The stock market will take care of it. And that was their rationale. So that was what happened. Yes?
Do you have any idea what they did with that money they didn't put in?
Oh, they gave it all to the pensioners. No, they simply said, we're increasing your pension benefits.
So I mean in...
Oh, you mean in state or...
Well, well, they haven't been putting it in all this time.
Well, any money that you didn't
with
put in has been allocated somewhere else.
Social services.
I don't really have a question. I do have another meeting I have to be at. I don't want you to think that I'm rude, leaving. Thank you so much for your time and for doing this. It's much appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Gotten the bulk of it. Any other questions? Okay.
In regards to like the Central Falls, so are there people, I'm just curious, if some of the powers that be are aware, is that like, are they waiting for that to happen? Is that going to set a precedent, or what?
It will set a precedent. Most of the information that went out in the early Central Falls was all misinformation. Nobody, actually there were probably 5 people in the state that understood what Chapter 9 bankruptcy was. And those people were staying quiet because they didn't want the bad news out. So I think people are going to be shocked when they find out exactly what is going to happen if, I should say, when Central Falls ultimately declares Chapter 9. There will be a huge outpouring of grief. Anyhow, yes.
Isn't that when Greg Davis was impeached and kicked out of office?
Well, he was in office at the time.
He did a recall.
You could say it was a retroactive impeachment. Yes.
Is there any case law out there that addresses when a municipality anywhere in the United States either cuts back or does something to detrimentally affect a pension? How have courts and judges ruled? Because the reason I ask that question is, should something happen in Rhode Island, I often wonder how the court system here and the judges are going to rule when weighing the best interests of the taxpayer as opposed to the best interests of the recipient of these pensions.
Well, I am not an attorney, so nothing I am saying should be construed as...
That's all right, I am, but I'll accept what
Okay.
you say.
All right. you have to start with the basic foundation that pension trust funds are not owned by the pensioners. The pension trust fund is actually an asset of either the corporation or the municipality. So when a Chapter 9 bankruptcy takes place, that asset is literally, it becomes an asset of the city itself, whatever is left in the pension trust fund. So they look at it as simply a bucket of money that was not spent. Just as if, let's imagine you had a waterworks project. You went out and got it funded, so you've got a bunch of money and bonds that you're going to enter, for the payments of getting pipes laid and everything else. That bucket of money just becomes a part of the Chapter 9 bankruptcy. And it has to be handled by a federal judge, can't be a state judge, because it is federal law. And so the first thing that they literally do is they see the money objectively. It's just a bucket of money. There's no connection with a poor pensioner or anything else. It's just a bucket of money. And what the judges have done, particularly in the case of Vallejo, and Vallejo didn't actually get a ruling. Vallejo was eventually went to mediation. But the judge called in an actuary and said, okay, based on the little amount